I just like the sound. Each one has its own unique character. You hear the difference? And then this one. My name is E Scott Lindner. I am a recording engineer, a studio owner, a father, a husband, and owner of 2 comedy clubs in Manhattan. Well, I was born in London, and I lived in London while I was a baby. My parents moved to France. That house burnt down, and so then we moved to Switzerland.
How did the house burn down?
We were on a ski trip. We were out skiing, and we came back, and the house was burnt down. Then my parents got divorced, and I moved to the States. I went to college in Montana, at Montana State University. I was there for 1 year. I went to Penn State for half a year, and then decided I did not belong in a university setting. If I try to remember being in a classroom, I have no memory. I can't remember being in a class, but I was in college for 2 years. What I do remember is playing music through this entire time and really diving into learning the guitar and experimenting with recording. You could say that the first incarnation of the studio was the first little bedroom that we were recording in with my friend Andy. We had a shitty Sony mic that we would plug into a cassette player, randomly throw it somewhere in the room, hit record, and we would just jam out, man. And I actually still have that microphone. I had Andy send it to me, so I have it hanging actually in the skylight as a big ceiling room mic, which I use on drums and stuff. I was playing in the band The Static Rising, which was my first sort of like serious band. We ended up landing in a space, basically in a rehearsal space, and we converted it into a small project studio, and we built wood, and it was all kind of crazy. And yeah, it was Studio Radio 45. And that's when we really started making serious records. I love sound and how sound works, and I like to build shit. I would find wood on the street, or I'd go to Home Depot and just buy a bunch of fucking wood. I would just put wood up everywhere and see how that sounded in recordings, and then I would deaden it all with blankets and see how that sounded with recordings. At that stage, I wasn't doing much science behind this stuff. I was just sticking shit up all over the place and seeing how it sounded. And I was never looking for really a big space until I came into this space and I saw the ceiling. Basically, the only thing I really wanted was a control room. So a separate space so I could talk shit about the artist and they couldn't hear, as long as I didn't have the talkback mic on, you know what I mean? When you come into the space, you can see it was 100% handmade. We didn't work with contractors. You know, it's professionally done in the sense that it's completely soundproofed and we did everything the proper way. There's still the element of me being like, I'm gonna stick something on this wall and see what it sounds like. That still happens. You know, people come into the studio all the time. They're like, man, every time I come in here, something different is going on. And that's how I want it to be. The Static Rising was all krautrock influence, which is repetitive, meditative, droning, polyrhythmic music that you can close your eyes to and just lose yourself in, you know, which is what I'm always seeking. And, you know, I've really, over the last couple of years, gotten into orchestral music. So, you know, going to the symphony and, you know, organic instruments that are not electronic. So violins, bassoons, and piano. I've really gotten into how that can be incorporated into a funky jazz rhythm in a non-cheesy way. The first record that I put out with Infinity Gritty was my solo record, E Scott Lindner. And the second album I did, which was last year, is called Port of Dreams. This is my third album now as a solo artist. The name of the record is In Flowers Through Space. It's called In Flowers Through Space because it matches sort of the Fibonacci sequence concept. So in flowers, you see the Fibonacci sequence very prominently, particularly in sunflowers. If you look at the center, you can see a very prominent spiral that happens, which is the Fibonacci sequence. In space, you're gonna see galaxies in spiral formations. I was sort of picturing myself in a flower, which is a spaceship. So the flower is the spaceship floating through space. So the concept of Fibonacci was not entirely my concept alone. It was actually here in the control room, Adam and I, Adam Ahuja, the owner of the label and the keyboard player, we were talking about basically concept.
So I remember sitting in the mixing room with Scott and we were talking about what he wanted to do for his next record. And he expressed sort of a sense of a void of not really knowing where to go next. And said like, Scott, is there a concept? Is there something, you know, sometimes a concept will help you find something that you're interested in. And he said, Yeah, and just kind of the gears were moving. Then I mentioned the Fibonacci sequence, which I always found to be really interesting, and it's just known as kind of a mystical, yet very much validated by natural science formula that we see in various incarnations in the world. And he said, well, what's that? And I explained, well, Fibonacci sequence is when you add the previous two numbers in a series, and it comes to this ratio called the golden ratio, and you see it all over nature. And he just immediately sort of lit up as if he found something. All of his ideas started shooting into it. And he said, oh, that could be cool. We could have the number of players on each part of the album that represents the numbers in the sequence. And all of a sudden, all these ideas started flying. And it was like, okay, he's got something to run with here.
I'm Jim, and I'm a web developer. I work with Scott at, doing all his comedy club stuff. I think he asked me just to kind of help him print out a Fibonacci sequence or something like that. And then I said, oh, I could actually program something that does this and also kind of converts it to musical notes. I developed a calculator that basically calculates Fibonacci sequences. The Fibonacci sequence is not a complicated formula. You're basically just taking one number, adding it to another number, and then adding another number to the sum of those numbers. So it's just basically simple addition. So the script is not very complicated, but then what I did is sort of took those numbers out of the Fibonacci sequence, and then you convert them to musical notes.
The Fibonacci sequence translates to the human brain as beauty. And I thought that was really interesting to try to make a record that was completely Fibonaccized, which is a word I made up, and see if it ended up being beautiful. Each track features the same number of musicians per track, and each track is labeled within the Fibonacci sequence. So track 0 has no musicians, track 1 has 1 musician, the next track would be 1, which has 1 musician, track 2 has 2 musicians, so on and so forth, until the last track, which is 21, and has 21 musicians in it.
I'm doing well. How are you doing?
I'm good, man.
Great.
Good.
Just looking over these papers and remembering what we did.
What's coming back to you looking at those papers?
As I look at each one, I kind of just get try to make the connection between what the notes were and who was in the room that day, and how we interacted, what we did together, how we talked, what we thought about the music, what devices we used to conjure up the concept. For me, working with a concept like Fibonacci sequence, that can go one of two ways. It can be really, really broad and fluffy and, hey, great, we're doing something conceptual and a big hurrah and almost cheesy. Or it can be something real and something interesting and something that you learn something from. And I think that's what we're trying to move towards. And so with the song One, that was the perfect opportunity to say, what is this whole thing about? How can we take this awesome mathematical construct and turn it into music? Let's see if the beauty of nature, this awesome formula which seems to appear everywhere, let's see if we get the same kind of beauty if we put it on the piano as the piano lies. And so we did that. And we translated the specific frequencies on the piano to reflect the same ratios that are in the formula. And then we put little pieces of tape on the piano, and then we let that slowly unfold and kind of sink into the sound. And that's the track we ended up with. You have this idea that something happens, and it just keeps getting more and more complex to the point where you ask yourself, how is this human being with this weird skin and all these various layers of nature, how does this come back to a single thing that happened? It seems so complex and so deep that you kind of lose the fact that there was a source or there was an event that was the birth of all this stuff. So that's how this track One represents the rest of the album. Musically speaking, it's coming from a formula that travels through the album scalarly in terms of the number of players, in terms of the names of the songs, in terms of the themes. Everything follows this principle. And in the first song, you hear the tone, you hear it all laid out. It's a calibration effect. It's saying, hey, look, this is that special formula. This is that source code that we're working with. So it's like, boom, it like sets it into play. And one of the reasons I think about the Big Bang is because in theoretical physics, they say there may be other universes that operate with other basic laws of nature. So our basic laws of nature are fixed to this particular universe. So we're saying, like, this is the law. Track one, now that you have the law, everything follows from there.
My name's Renat Pincus. I play the cello. I've been playing since I was a little kid. I have a really awesome cello. My cello was made circa late 1700s, but the maker is unknown, but it has really, really beautiful wood and a really rich sound. My cello is also small. It's called lady size. It's smaller than usual, which works for me since I'm pretty short. As a cellist, I grew up pretty strictly classical. I went to a conservatory. I was trained classically. I worked with like really wonderful and great classical artists. Then, in the past 5 years or so, things started to take a turn, and I started dabbling into the pop world and pop music world. So I've done a lot of television and sound recordings for, people like Eminem and Alicia Keys and John Legend and Miley Cyrus and big name people like that. I came upon this project because a friend of mine about a day before couldn't make it, so she asked me to sub for her, and here I came. And when I came here, I just was pretty shocked when I got the instructions of what we were about to do.
I usually will create these forms for the musicians, and we'll kind of collaborate and work off of the form as sort of a skeleton.
Up-tempo, determined to succeed in a new life.
Ambitious and naive.
Movement, anxiety, excitement.
Beginning a long journey with vigor.
This general frantic-sounding piece slowly rises in intensity until we reach a very loud and dynamic climax, almost an explosion into outer space.
I just sit down at a computer and just start typing whatever's on my mind, and I try not to think too much about it and just let what's happening come out of my mind.
I kind of wanted to run out the door and call my friend and was like, where did you send me to? What am I doing here?
Does anybody want burritos by any chance?
Yeah. Yes.
Do you want a burrito?
I just ate before coming, so I'm good.
Nick doesn't want mine. He brought his lunch.
I think I was just kind of like a deer in a headlights when I first met Scott, mainly because of what he was asking me to do. Most classical musicians are never allowed to take any creative liberties or stray from the page. We have to stick to every single note, dot, bowing that's marked on the paper. I met Scott and I said, where's the music? And he said, oh, no music, you're just making up the session today. So I got really nervous at first.
It's always difficult when you're working with someone you've never worked with and you bring them into the room and you're like, okay, it's just you by yourself in the live room. This is what I want you to do. Go ahead and make that happen.
I was panicked, actually, and almost this nervous, hopeless feeling kind of coming over me. And I started to doubt myself a little bit. And we kind of slowly started just talking about it and working through it. So we came up with a note sequence. And then we started coming up with little fragments of ideas based on the instructions that were given.
I think it can invoke a lot of anxiety for the musician to have to create music just out of nothing.
Because it's changing the note, the start notes.
So where's the one that's bothering me, the first one?
Yeah, it's just because of the root.
So how's it going? Is this? not.
Okay.
Just trust me. One thing I've learned is I gotta trust my instincts.
I feel at one point though, we kind of like hit a roadblock. So everybody who was listening in left the room, including Scott.
Okay. So we'll go up there for like 10, 15 minutes. Is that cool?
Yeah, don't worry, I got it.
And then you can do your thing. I wanted her to have her own space to be able to experiment with stuff, make mistakes, all that kind of stuff, you know, without us just her, you know, standing over her.
They left me in the room for, I don't know, 30, 40 minutes by myself. And when they got back from lunch, we just kind of did it and banged it out, and it was great.
I think since it's so early in the record, it's almost like the record is just being born. It's just coming out of something, you know, and I wanted it to be naive. I wanted to not have necessarily the darkness and you know, like a baby or a young child not knowing what's coming. That take felt really great.
Okay.
Do you want to come in and listen?
Sure.
My name is Andrew Gould. I play saxophone and flute. I'm from Long Island, New York, currently living in Queens, and I'm on this album. The Fibonacci sequence was something that I had heard of, but I didn't really know much about it.
Siri, what is the Fibonacci sequence? It says, I'll tap you when I'm ready. What the fuck does that mean? What is the Fibonacci sequence?
Here's what I found.
Oh, she doesn't fucking say it. The Fibonacci Sequence is a British chamber ensemble co-founded by horn player Stephen Sterling.
To my understanding, the Fibonacci sequence is this thing that occurs naturally in nature, and it's been happening since the universe started. What I think is really interesting is it happens despite the fact that we're not aware of it at all. The best thing that I could do to accurately capture it is to not think about it, not force it, because it's going to be present regardless of what I do. So listening back to the tracks just to jog my memory, because we did this album, you know, on several different dates. So I almost couldn't remember, oh wait, which song was this, which song was this? You know, so just jogging my memory, it really takes me back to that day and my thought process and thinking how I can best capture the music and what Scott wants to happen. You know, and Scott has a very unique way of trying to illustrate what he wants to happen musically, because he has these forms right here where he actually writes out via words what he wants to have happen. An amazingly beautiful sunny day at the Renaissance Fair. A knight freshly back from a long journey of pain and despair spots a lady picking fresh fruit from the market. The moment and feeling of that split second when all things stop and hope returns. I basically had to literally picture what was happening in this description. And the funny thing is, you know, because Tomoko was playing violin and I'm playing flute, my part kind of really identifies more with being the lady picking the fresh fruit.
My name is Tomoko Omura, and I play violin. I've never worked this way, you know, creating music like this. So he has a lot of ideas, and ideas are written in a paper, not with actual notes or rhythms or melodies. So we have to create that. But he has also this visual image or storytelling thing in the music that we can imagine together and create something together on the spot. I was thinking like a Game of Thrones, even though I've never watched it, like maybe first episode, but it was kind of like my imagination, like Lord of the Rings, or, you know, that kind of medieval Renaissance feeling I started the song, I think the solo violin enters, and so I was the man. And then I came back to town, and then saw a woman, and then we stop. And then another music starts, you know? So yes, the roles were reversed, I think.
It was interesting to, you know, to have to put myself in that opposite, you know, set of shoes, but it was really cool. Also just, you know, because I'm really mainly a saxophone player and flute is, you know, a secondary instrument, you know, and Tomoka's like such an amazing violinist and just like so technically capable on the violin that, you know, I really felt like I was slightly off balance, but in a good way, not that I couldn't execute the music, but just that it brought out some almost more fragile, exposed parts of my playing in this piece of music, and I think that it really came through and it really kind of captured the image that much more because of the role that I was playing and being, you know, a flute player.
Okay, so tell me your name.
Carlos Mena.
And what do you do?
I'm a bassist. I play electric, I play upright, guitar, I play some piano, compose. I just love music. Music is my life. I met Scott through Pablo Eluchan's the drummer.
Are you fucking kidding me? I didn't know you started already. Did you start?
Yeah, we're in the middle of it.
I had no idea, dude. I didn't even know you switched. When did you switch? Get out.
All right. Let's continue. It's a very unique process because, you know, we all write the music together.
He basically gives us this shit with instructions. It's a form that all of us, we have to decipher. It's challenging. I'm telling you, it's very challenging.
You know, you are like looking at the clock because you have like a certain amount of time.
There are moments where we all are like, damn, where is this going, you know? But then at some point we listen back and it's like, wow.
It works out at the end somehow, you know, it all comes together. So it's like a discovery, you know, like you're discovering things at the moment. At the same time, you have like that pressure we were talking about, like everything you play is gonna be on record, but also not being afraid of it, you know, and just like hoping for the best. You can be surprised by what somebody else is playing or what you are playing.
Generally a pretty fun vibe, so you have to create something fun, but groovy and chilling. Driving on a beautiful summer day through the streets of New York, only to realize you're actually in space. Animals get hit by a car, but walk away happy. Those are your instructions. I start by myself, actually, I think this one. Saxophone comes in with some weird effect, and I guess that's the animal. Pablo comes in with some, I think he had a rock.
So I remember that being a really fun session, and then it was Scott's idea to use the SPD, which is a sampling pad. I believe it was like two small rocks that I picked up and then I like hit against each other. And I believe that's the sound that we were using.
So this was really fun for me because it was a little different than how I normally just record saxophone, which is just me playing through a mic, because I had two mics set up. And one was for my effect pedal, which is kind of a synth pedal. It makes an electronic synthesized sound that duplicates the same note that I'm playing on the saxophone. This is the first time I ever recorded using that pedal that I had just got, which is really cool, and I'm a super gear nerd, so I got to experiment. And that also brings out extra things in how I play too, because I'm hearing myself differently. And as a musician, whenever you hear yourself differently, you play different stuff.
So it was a whole spacey sort of vibe.
I think Scott's role in this is really interesting.
So you have all the music in the mixer, you know, every instrument, and also you have the talkback, which is Scott in the control room. So every once in a while, or I mean, more than every once in a while, like often he would, you know, be talking to us, saying what he likes, what things maybe we can try differently, sometimes even like giving cues within the songs, because we're just getting familiar with the music, you know, with the songs, with the form and everything. So he'll be like, hey, 2 more bars and then we go to the chorus or saxophone solo or whatever. He's as busy as I am. Like from my point of view, like I was saying, I have the chart, I have this, I have that. You know, he has other concerns, some of the same, some different, you know, so we're all in this together. That's kind of like the cool thing, you know?
He was controlling the pedals, so he was kind of controlling an aspect of my sound on this specific track, because he was recording, you know, and like really manipulating the delay of my saxophone. So Scott had this really interesting idea for which he wanted me to kind of make a melody out of, and he wrote out a bunch of different syllables, all kind of based on the Fibonacci sequence.
Ba ba, da da da, do do, dot dot dot, da da, do do, boo, da da da, boo, da da da. That was what I told him to play.
So what I did is I assigned a different musical note in the key that we were in to each syllable, and then in a sort of arbitrary way came up with a melody based on those syllables. And so it ended up being this really cool melody that I never in a million years would have made up myself. And I remember even like coming up with what was the melody and being like, Scott, is this what you wanted? Is that cool? And he was like, dude, it's awesome.
My name is Heather Lindner, and I'm Scott's wife. Scott and I met in Times Square. I was in New York City for about 2 weeks, and I needed a job. I lived in Queens, and the only place I knew how to get to was Times Square. And I went to actually go get a job at Fridays, like to apply to be a hostess. I got out of the subway station, and one of Scott's employees stopped me to see if I wanted to buy comedy tickets. I didn't know at the time that like you should just ignore those people. Then we started talking, and he was like, oh, you should work for us. You should come and work. Come and meet my boss. And his boss was Scott. And he was like, okay, yeah, come tomorrow to this address. I'll give you an interview. I actually got hired at Fridays, but something told me to just try something new because I was in New York. And I got to the comedy club and did my interview. I got hired, and I thought he was adorable the first time. I didn't know how crazy he was at that time, but I thought he was really cute. And that was definitely incentive to come back. I sold comedy club tickets in Times Square for 3 weeks, but my real motivation was just to like be around him. We realized we liked each other, and he told me, I can't date you if I'm your boss. So I was like, okay, I need to get a new job, and I did. And we've been together ever since. Everyone thinks like, oh, Scott's the crazy one, he's neurotic, but like at home, he's like our rock, you know? He's a great husband. He's a great dad. He's always here for us, you know. He's very loving. He's very funny. He's always made me laugh. Scott was an active alcoholic and not in the best place when Henry was a baby. So Henry was almost 2 when Scott got sober.
I got sober at some point during Studio Radio 45, which is a miracle considering that that place was my dark little corner of the world where I was able to isolate and get fucked up.
But before he got sober, I was like, I'm not having any other kids. I can't do this. I felt like I was alone. It was just me and Henry against the world, you know, and Scott was going through his own thing. And I didn't really understand it at the time. I didn't get it. I didn't understand what alcoholism was. And I was kind of in denial too, like, because I thought, well, I can have a drink and then just have one and whatever, I don't need any more. I didn't understand that he couldn't stop because he was sick. Our lives were just kind of in an upheaval. We were moving a lot. We didn't have any money. I was literally looking for a way to get food stamps. Like I'd go to the grocery store and I'd have to put things back, and it was so embarrassing. Like I'd have my little 1-year-old with me, and I didn't have enough money to pay for everything, you know? It was a tough time.
My rock bottom was at the comedy club, actually. And a lot of my time was spent at Studio 45 drinking in the daytime where nobody knew.
I was always home taking care of everything there. He was off doing his own thing. And he got home really late one night. I got up to go to the bathroom and he was just sitting on the couch, passed out. And the way that he was sitting, that triggered something in me that I felt like something's not right here. I happened to call Emilio, his business partner, and the whole truth came out of what happened that night.
I got way too drunk, I blacked out, and I was throwing up at the club, I was tearing shit off the walls, I was a complete and utter disaster.
That was the day that Scott, between throwing up, said, I need help. And that's all I needed to hear. And I was like, okay, now I see that there's a huge problem here and he needs help. A year after he got sober, he and Emilio decided, you know what we're doing is not working anymore. There's only so far we can go. Let's try to own this club. And that's one of the things that I actually told him this a few days ago that I admire so much about Scott is that I feel like he's really brave. I feel like he doesn't realize that about himself, but the way that he just goes for things, and he's like, yeah, I can do this. I'm gonna do this. And it worked. And it's still working. It's crazy. I mean, he turned his whole life around. Another thing that is here because he's sober is our son, Jack.
So what I thought was alcohol and drugs were enhancing my ability to be creative, but it was actually the complete opposite. I'm more creative now than I've ever been. I've been sober for 6 years. The whole time I've been in this studio, I've been sober. My life is completely different than it was when I was drinking. Completely different. I've had health issues on different days. I don't know, every day I have different neuroses. I thought I had diabetes. They thought I had anemia. I don't know. Recently I've been feeling lethargic. Maybe I have diabetes, because one of the side effects of diabetes is lethargy. I've always had tooth issues. This top tooth has been really bothering me, so I ended up having to go to the dentist and get a root canal. Before doing that, though, we had track 5. And we had 2 songs scheduled that day, which was originally gonna be track 5 and track 8. I was in a lot of pain that day, and it's funny because we ended up doing a track that's like happy and fun, but the truth is I was like, I don't want to be here, my fucking mouth hurts.
Queensboro Plaza Dental Care?
Yeah. Oh wait, you don't have an appointment yet?
No, the two places I go are both closed.
Oh fuck.
I was gonna just go to an urgent care.
You feel like shit?
Yeah.
Hi, my name is Laura Goldman. My role at Pinch Recording is now studio manager because I did not know I got promoted. I help everything run smoothly. That's a lie. I just kind of get everybody coffee. No matter what ailment he has, it's cancer. So when his tooth started hurting, oh, mouth cancer.
The dentist was closed. I couldn't even go to the fucking dentist, so I went to the urgent care instead. And actually, as it turns out, urgent care is kind of better than a dentist. Sort of through the whole process of the record, I was having like tooth infection issue. I mean, it sounds kind of stupid looking back on it. It's just a stupid tooth infection. But I tell you, man, tooth pain is severe. I had severe pain. It was horrible. I was driving my wife crazy.
The fucking tooth. The tooth thing started happening like 14 years ago.
She always thinks I'm full of shit, which because 9 out of 10 times I usually am full of shit.
He's like, I feel like you just don't have any sympathy for me. I'm like, I've had sympathy about your tooth for like 14 years. Just go to the dentist. You can't deal with the tooth. Just rip it out. I will rip it out for you.
I always feel like I have some weird shit going on. I think 9 times out of 10 it is anxiety. I was even looking up mono. I was like, maybe I have mono. But I think it's actually just having kids. Like, you know what I mean? Like, having 2 kids, like, makes you feel like you have mono. The process of making a record, a lot of it is about organization and wrapping cables. As an audio engineer, most of your time is spent wrapping cables. It's kind of like a metaphor for life, these fucking cables. They have a way of wrapping themselves up. Even when you do things very organized and try to keep everything clean, somehow shit gets fucked up. Everything you need to know about life is right here in this cable. Day 6 of recording. There wasn't supposed to be this many days, but the universe has a different plan for us. You know what I mean? Because this is actually track 8, but we were supposed to record this on a different day. And I got an infection in my mouth, and I had to deal with the dentist. So I had to reschedule everything. But the wonderful thing about that is now we're in a different space entirely, and we're going to be breaking a piñata today.
Don't trip on it.
What are you doing, Scott?
I'm getting flowers to put into the piñata to showcase the Fibonacci sequence. Because, you know, in the flowers, there's the Fibonacci spiral in there. We put it in a tambourine. We're putting the flowers in the piñata. The form is in here already. The form of the song, I put index cards in there with the form. So when they hit it, the form of the song is going to come out in little pieces. And on the back of the index cards, what I did is I wrote like a bunch of random things on the index cards, like the bass plays 8 bars of groovy feel, 70s vibe, whatever. And then on the back of that index, and then I mixed all the index cards randomly, like shuffled them randomly. And then in the back of the cards, I did the Fibonacci sequence with numbers. So I did 0, 1, 1, 2, 3, 5, 8, 13, 21, 34, so on and so forth. And then when they break it, we're going to try to line them with those numbers in a spiral. And then flip the cards, and we'll see if that form works as the form for the song, number 8.
What's coming back to you looking at that?
How it all started with us like smacking the piñata. And then just all these instructions came out, and then it was like, oh, okay. How do we do this?
We started out the song by going upstairs into an empty, weird-looking old art room and blasting a piñata of a spaceship. If we're drawing a thread out here, that's a big bang, you know? And you start going and you start getting to that point where after all the drudgery of walking around and trying to remember who you are, you say, oh yeah, we're these things, you know? We're kind of a reflection of the universe. Let's hit a big piñata and see what comes out. 8 was, let's take it to the next level. Let's make our community bigger. Let's bring in new people. We had people step in here and meet each other that we never met before. And how do you do that? You find something you all have in common, which is hitting a piñata.
There was just like nothing else there. It was a totally bare room with just a spaceship piñata hanging in the middle. And we all just sort of looked at each other like, what is going on? I've definitely never been to a recording session where there was a piñata involved. This was definitely a first, for sure.
It was more of a game to kind of get us to all just have a different way of getting the information. If I said to you every single day, hello, like, I have the same tie on in the morning, and here's the paper, and here's what you need. Sometimes you need variation to spark things up or to get a fresh inspiration. So this was that. Instead of handing a piece of paper with a bunch of information on it, it was like, hit the piñata, and you're gonna find little pieces of the form in the room, and then everyone's kind of collecting them and figuring out what order they go in. And in fact, there was just kind of a random order.
I've been in sessions before where I don't really know anybody, and it's not the most comfortable thing because you're supposed to be creative and make beautiful things with people that you've just met. But I think this really broke the ice way more, you know, than just throwing people into a session and, you know, and go make music. You know, this was a good icebreaker. I mean, literally like breaking the ice.
Every time I do these, I show up, we do the form. It's become a little formulaic. So I wanted to kind of do something to get the musicians to be interacting before trying to make the music. Because a lot of times what happens is all the musicians show up and it's right into, hey, here's the form, let's start working. And I wanted to kind of break that ice before getting into the studio and doing that to see if maybe that would create a more comfortable environment for people, because sometimes the musicians don't know each other.
It was actually very interesting seeing how everybody hit the piñata, because it was very different. Like some people were sort of like timid, like, you know, like kind of shy. And some people were just like, you know, like huge smacks, and like people were like, whoa, because it wasn't that big a room. So you had to be careful not to hit other people. I used to play golf. I don't know. I don't know. Yeah, I think I hit it pretty hard. But, you know, eventually it did break, and all the, you know, all these pieces of paper came out, and rose petals. So we had to sort of, you know, grab up the little pieces off the floor and put them in order. So the form was very unusual. Each piece of paper had two sides, as most pieces of paper do. And one side was a number in the Fibonacci sequence, and the other side was an instruction. So sometimes it was a musical instruction, like 4/4 time, or cymbal crash, or you know, organ keyboard solo. And sometimes it was just like a creative direction, like blue swirl sound, or like, you know, head bobbing, head nodding paradise sound, you know. Yeah, so we put it in the order of the Fibonacci sequence, and then the form took form.
So for number 8, the form was so unconventional and long and like all over the place. There were some repeating sections, but it was so hard to keep track of it. Whenever I make charts, I feel like writing things down helps me then like memorizing, you know, and like remembering things and like seeing you know, things on paper or on a screen, you know. So I was using an iPad, and then I colored some things, you know, so if we had like the bridge, which happened maybe like 2 or 3 times, I would like put it like color it green or something, and then the verse is red, you know, giving it some order, some sense, I guess.
Making lyrics up and a melody up on the spot is, I think, really, really fun. But this was definitely an added challenge, because you had this kind of wild form, which was very abnormal. Then also there was the, you know, the theme in Flowers Through Space. So I guess I kind of used that as the lyrical core. It sort of pushes you to really want to do your best. There's free creative reign, you know, it's just do whatever you feel. And I've never been in a studio situation which was quite as free.
If I hadn't gotten the tooth infection, we would have had a completely different 8, because that's what the Fibonacci wanted. That's what the universe wanted.
Floaty, futuristic landscape, complex textures, groovy. Think modern dancer running around on a cold beach on a faraway planet with loose silk clothing, which is floating around in the high winds and cold breeze. Many moons ago, yet many moons from now. Is it dusk or dawn? For me, That might have been one of the easier ones to interpret in a song, if I'm gonna be honest with you, because the imagery was so specific and I could see exactly what he said in my head.
You know, I think it is cool how we use the Fibonacci sequence. It's a human construct, totally, just using those integers of, you know, these patterns. Like, you know, we put together the pattern on a computer, not in the real world. You know, it's a human construct, and the record is very human. He kind of took that construct and looked at it every which way.
There was a whole bunch of us on this. There was a bigger horn section, more instrumentalists involved, more moving pieces. So whenever there's more pieces, it means there's more stuff you need to figure out.
It didn't feel like 13 people were there. It felt like a lot less people were there. The way everything worked out, there was high level of organization. And to me, the concept that emerged from all that was mastery. If you look at the progression of stuff that's been coming up, all these different principles, these universal principles, mastery is further down the line. So if you're getting towards the end of the album, mastery is kind of becoming to know, truly know oneself. And to me, some of that was happening here. I remember this song being created with such ease.
We were used to the workflow at this point, and then we just went in and did it. And anybody else that came in that was new, that didn't know the workflow, they kind of got a really quick education as to what was to happen. And it was almost just a little bit more specific and focused. And that's kind of what needs to happen, I think, when there's that many more people involved.
We had 2 trumpets, 2 trombones, 2 bassoons, 2 saxes, bass, drums, blah, 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 and so on and so forth. And Jim on the modular synths, you know, we had a big band. This was another one of those where we're writing the form and everybody's getting tense and things are getting stressful and there's a lot of people talking and trying to figure out parts and this madness where everything feels like nothing's gonna come together and it's not gonna work. And then all of a sudden you do a take, or you know, I'll say, all right guys, let's try it one time and just see what happens. And it's like, whoa, it worked. My favorite part of this track is the bassoon solo. I've always been a huge fan of bassoon. There's something about that instrument that I absolutely love, and you don't typically hear a bassoon solo. And it just has this really cool feel and it sets the mood for the track.
You do all these crazy, like, challenging records, and as well as like run a comedy club and have all this like massive amounts of pressure per day, and yet you add pressure into your life by coming up with these insane projects. Where does that drive come from for you?
I don't think I necessarily want to do it. I think I have to.
Scott is really talented. I think he just helps people to overcome their issues and, you know, expand the musicality.
It could have been a disaster, but I think Scott has a very sort of trustworthy attitude and just kind of, yeah, it's gonna be fine. It's gonna be, everything's gonna be great. You know, just giving us full trust, and yeah, I think that's what made it really work.
My name is Alex Van Gils, and I am a composer. I think I started composing music when I was very young. I remember being like 8 years old, taking piano lessons, and in my dream one night, I had this like kind of fully formed piano piece. And when I woke up in the morning, I distinctly remember remembering how the piece went. But I'm 8 and I'm not good at piano. I like basically like pounded on the piano and I showed it to my piano teacher and he was just like, it's like I went to the piano class and I'm just like basically just making a ton of noise in the lower half of the piano. I don't think he was very impressed. I got involved in this project with Scott. I think he heard my string quartet that I wrote for the Friction Quartet, and I think he heard some of my electroacoustic music. From those two things, I think he got a sense that he liked what I do as a composer. He had this vision of like a jazz band with additional woodwinds, string quartet, and singers. I was also interested in the way that he wanted to work. He gives these prompts to the musicians and to myself that were very much like, there's like low, wet, rustling strings. Out of this sound, we hear a choir emerge. The melody arrives in the bassoons, and then there's a loud swell from the cymbals. It's very interesting because he's not necessarily writing or arranging that music, but in his musical imagination, he has these ideas. Wonka, as in Willy Wonka, and Bond, as in James Bond, float through the unknown universe on a magical journey of discovery and dreams. I just love this.
Just to give you an idea of the instrumentation, we're talking about 21 musicians on this track. Drums, upright bass, Rhodes, 2 trumpets, 2 saxes, 2 bassoons, 2 trombones, synth, guitar, 2 violins, cello, viola, and 4 singers.
This was a new experience for me because generally when I am composing for a particular ensemble, it's not like a mixed ensemble in this particular way. So I like that challenge.
There's a lot of stuff going on with this track. You know, it was written over a long course of time. It was extremely complex. We have a full score for the track. It was very difficult to achieve. In fact, the first time I've really had issues with any musicians in the first 3 albums. This was the first time I've had issues with the musicians.
My name is Whitney George. I'm a composer and a conductor. Alex got in touch with me, he's the composer of the work. What was most exciting is I hadn't met Alex yet, and he talked to me about his project over the phone, showed me a score, but then the rest of it was very, very much in the line of like, you sort of old style composition, you hand it over to someone and it's then realized. There's this beautiful element of order and chaos that's ongoing at the same time, especially the way that we put it together with these many different parts that don't have relevance until they're a part of a meaningful whole. We had that kind of construction here where we really didn't have everything really make sense until all of our bits and pieces came together as a larger sequence rather than smaller components. We didn't rehearse as a group before we did the recording. Anything that we do in the studio on day 1 affects what happens on multiple days in the studio. So you kind of have an issue of not like problems accumulating, but that like any sort of bending of the system is then a part of the system that you have to work with from that point forward.
Initially, I wanted to have the choir in the same room as the strings. I wanted them to all be in the same room and to all perform the piece together. When we did the first take, it was clear immediately that was not going to work. Put the vocalists in the lounge.
Okay, perfect.
And let's just I don't know how to communicate this to them necessarily.
Why don't you let's not make them feel weird. You just be like, we don't have the sound that's right. We need to isolate you guys. If we can just have you like, because there's too many bodies in this piece, just bring them upstairs. Yeah, I can tell them that.
Okay.
Yeah, is that okay?
We'll put them upstairs. Let's move the mics first, and then we can start doing takes of the strings while we set this up. So we're gonna put the two girls in the medium booth and the 2 boys in the small booth, and just stack the drums. Like, there's only gonna need to be 2 people here. Okay, and I'll help you move this shit right now. I just realized I don't have shoes on.
There's some things that just don't work out in the studio, and I think as as someone who also composes, and Alex is such a gifted composer, that we are both constantly surprised by what works amazingly well upon first go of a piece of work and what is unexpectedly difficult. The choir aspect of this has these beautiful, rich harmonies that kind of expand and contract within the context of the overall orchestration. And that's really, really difficult to do. You don't have buttons on your body that you can press to create a particular note.
Right? You can't sing in key. Why are you?
I thought they would be singing by now. Why not?
She thought this was going to be fast. She thinks it's better to be able to just do the vocals like on their own, which I think she's probably right. Because they're being thrown off by this. But if the choir, I'm not sure how to deal with that situation.
Well, I guess let's wait and see
if they're able to do it.
If they're able to do it. If not, you can just say, guys, we gotta get this done.
You're gonna have to hire someone else. We were not able to get what we needed. We thought maybe we could work with what they gave us. We ended up having to hire another choir to redo the parts.
That one thing that I had to overdub a million times. Yeah. For Charlotte.
We're doing vocals take 2. We got a really stellar group here.
The vibe is good today so far, but again, it's very preliminary. I'll let you know if things go south. You know what I mean? But luckily, Caillou's wearing jean shorts, so we're good to go. And he's showing his muscles. Can you see his muscles? Pretty fucking buff. He's like a scarecrow.
Bring Sally down. And then there's some words that I don't understand.
Hold it.
Oh. The brain was silent.
I should take a page from everyone's book. I'm so lazy.
We're bringing Sally up and down. Wow, Lucy. She's still bringing Sally up and down.
She really is.
Oh, fuck no. All right.
The second choir was fantastic, and I'm super happy that we decided to do that versus trying to fix the other vocals.
I think Scott is really fabulous. He has a beautifully intense energy about him, but a direct willingness to like let's come to the solution, let's make it work immediately. I was asked for a lot of input, like how do we think this sounds? How would we think about making orchestration choices or overdubbing choices and stuff like that? So Scott has such a great pair of ears, and so does Alex. So the combination of both of them, like giving me the opportunity to have a voice to be like, hey, I think this is where we could see improvement, was awesome. I don't see that kind of willingness on the role of audio engineer, master mixer of the domain. He's a creator as well. And I think people don't give enough credit to the studio also being an instrument. He plays it amazingly.
And just so for some background, Kevin has been mastering pretty much almost everything at Pinch that comes through us, and everything at Infinity Gritty. So he's as much of the sound as anything else these days, you know? Thanks, man. Just so everybody knows on the document. We are in Bushwick, Brooklyn, doing the mastering for the record, which is the final step in a record. It's Kevin Blackler, who is a kind of a clone of Scott, physically and mentally. Well, not every way mentally. I mean, Scott's probably a little crazier than Kevin. Kevin's great. Kevin's been doing so much of the work for us with Infinity Gritty and with pinch recording. He's become kind of a staple, and the final layering of sound is his signatures on all that stuff too.
Fibonacci. Why don't you explain it? Because I hate explaining it. I'm so sick of explaining it.
Yeah.
Well, you can do half, I'll do the other half.
That
How about
sounds good. Well, we were talking about the tracks, and he listened to the first few to get his head around it and said, oh, it seems a little more acoustic. And I said, well, the number of the tracks correspond with the sequence, and amongst other things, how the sequence concept is integrated into music. One of the things is that each track, and the fact that it's named, 0, 1, 1, 2, 3, 5, 8.
Oh my God.
Each number.
I didn't make 0. I never made 0.
Oh, you didn't.
Can we make 0 here?
What is 0?
We're gonna make 0 here.
Yeah.
It's gonna happen.
So basically,
we're making 0.
the sequence is. When
He'll
you
get credit
add the
for
previous
0.
two integers.
Yeah, let me know how you're gonna do it. Just with the camera, or? I mean, I got a microphone.
Do you have a mic?
Yeah.
I'm recording.
All I hear is the ringing in my ears.
I hear the rumbling in my stomach from all that Thai food.
That Thai food fucking busted me up, man.
There you go. Ready?
100 degrees? Great, let's get some Thai food.
1, 2, 3.
Oh, shit. You're the one that's gonna be fixing it, so.
Yeah.
At the end of every project and every album I do, I'm always in sort of a depressed mood because I'm like, what was the point of any of this? No one's gonna listen to this record, and if they do, they'll listen to 5 seconds on Instagram. What am I doing this for? Now, of course, I don't think that's the truth. I try to remind myself that that's not really the purpose, is to have somebody tell you that they like the record. And if I'm making records to have people give me feedback on them, then I'm always gonna be disappointed. I don't think the purpose is to even have a record. I really wanna try to understand that the process is what is important. And making the record is the most important part, because that's life. Life is a series of moments.